whatever, but it's supposed to be some special breathing technique, and like I meditate every day, so I know the importance of breathing. It's so weird, like breathing. It's like you're not doing anything, but at the same time you're doing everything. So it's like water. It's like water doesn't have anything in it, but it does everything. It's super weird.
It's true, and breath is something that in our culture it's a second thought. Because we do it so naturally, I guess. But man, read anything on Buddhism or Hinduism, the importance of breath. It's all right there. People have been studying it for thousands of years. It really comes down to mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
Being in the moment that we're in. It's kind of fun. All right. Welcome to the Inspire Life podcast. I'm excited today. We have Ayodeji Awosika. Did I say that right?
Ayodeji Awosika.
Ayodeji Awosika.
Yes.
Okay, Ayodeji Awosika. Ayo is a friend of mine. I call him Ayo. You go by Ayo?
Yeah, I go by Ayo. Most people don't know my full name, so
okay.
It's all good.
Ayo is a friend of mine from Winona State University from college, and I'm excited. We're gonna learn more about him, what he's doing. He's doing a lot of really cool things, getting into writing, self-help, personal development. Helping people understand how to be their best selves. But when I met you, who we were back then to now, it's almost laughable to think about. So I guess with that, I just want to ask, to start off, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am an author. I am a writing coach, so I help other bloggers get their careers off the ground. And altogether, I guess I would consider myself a student of life. There was a period of time a couple years ago where my life wasn't going so well, so I started looking into different self-improvement techniques, and that led to me becoming a writer. A friend of mine noticed that I would share all these personal development teachings and stuff on my Facebook, and I was kind of like writing longer than normal Facebook statuses to where they almost look like essays. And
I remember that.
He was like, dude, do you want to write for my website? And I'm like, sure. And I was like, what should I write about? He said I could write whatever I wanted to. That's awesome. That was about 5 years ago. I wrote a blog post on his website, and I haven't stopped at all since.
Yeah. And you have 2 books published.
Two books published.
Working on the 3rd one right now.
Yes.
And I read the Destiny Formula. I like that one. It was really good. It puts a lot of, I like how you use different examples for a lot of different successful people and how to overcome challenges and, getting your mind right, your mindset right. So tell me more about the Destiny Formula, U 2.0. I have it downloaded on my Audible, on Audible and Kindle.
Sure.
I haven't gotten into it yet, but just tell me more about the books that you've written.
Yeah, so the Destiny Formula is really a book about finding your strengths. And like we were talking about earlier before we turned the camera on, the education system and the society that we live in has you fixated on everything you're not good at. It has you fixated on perfectionism and getting everything right. But the real process of figuring out the type of life you want to live and a type of life that's going to be successful for you involves finding your strengths. And so that book teaches you different techniques to figure out what you're good at. And there's also personal development advice in there just to get to the heart of the fact that you already kind of know what you're good at. You already kind of have the dreams in the back of your mind, but how do you get those dreams out? How do you hone in on those strengths? And it's just a matter of focusing on the things you're good at and ignoring basically everything else until you get that foundation built up. Because when you don't focus on your strengths, you're unhappy, and B, you don't perform well at what you're doing. So people go into jobs and careers and paths that they're not suited for, and they lack talent in that, so it makes them unhappy, and it makes them underperform at their jobs too.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned, and in the book, a couple of different things that you mentioned there. One is strengths, and I know you mentioned the Strengths Finder in the book. So I do have a question. What are your 5 strengths from the Strengths Finder?
Let me see if I can remember. I can remember most of them. So the first one was ideation. So people who have the strength of ideation are always fascinated with ideas. They're the person who's always cooking up something.
Yeah.
They always have a business idea. They always want to talk about big ideas and debate. Adaptability is another one of mine. So I'm the type of person who could be put into many different situations and thrive because I don't need a lot of structure and planning to be successful. I'm not a perfectionist. So that's why I lean towards things like writing and entrepreneurship and starting these different platforms because you always have to think on your feet.
You get an idea and you go with it.
I get ideas and I go with them.
Nice.
I think intellection was another one.
Okay.
Which basically means I just love consuming information. So I read constantly. I watch personal development stuff constantly. I watch random documentaries constantly. So I'm basically trying to like pour as much information into my brain as possible to kind of make good output out of it. Futuristic was another one.
Yeah.
So people who are futuristic, they like to think about the future and plan and create strategies, which is actually the other one, strategic.
Yep. Okay.
So I'm the type of person who can look 5 years into the future and kind of reverse engineer that and figure out what I need to do now. So most people, while it's good to be in the present moment, most people are too much in the present moment where they never like zoom out and understand the big picture of what they're doing, which is what leads to 5 to 10 years is going by, and all of a sudden you've been at that crappy job for 5-10 years. You've been in the situation you don't want because day in and day out things kind of spin out of control.
Absolutely, yeah. And the strategic part that was actually my number one when I took the Strengths Finder. And if you look at the way I have this podcast, all this stuff set up, it's all strategic, right? Just thinking about things, what's going to make everything flow the best. And I think that's really a testament to at least what I've seen you put out, because just hearing your strengths now after reading that book too, it makes a lot of sense with the writing that you're doing and where you're at and how you've been able to transfer your life or transform your life. Because back to what we were talking about earlier in Winona State, we were out Thursday, Friday, Saturday having a good time.
Yes, we were.
Yes, we were. Tell me a little bit more too about your story and transformation and what it took for you to get from where you were at and being unhappy with your job and career to where you're at now.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. So I was living in Winona, it's the college town that we both went to. Everyone else had basically left town. I was the last one there. I had dropped out of college, didn't even get my degree. I was living in this like shoddy apartment. I was dead broke. And one day I applied to work at a video store called Family Video.
Yeah, I remember that.
At first I was just trying to get a job because I just needed some money. So I was like, all right, let me apply here. Let me be a clerk, whatever. And the manager was like, they noticed that I had, I was still articulate when I walked in, and, they were impressed by me, I guess. So they offered me the role of being a manager. And I was like, okay, this isn't some huge opportunity, but it was really like the first time someone actually believed in me a little bit. And I was like, all right, I've screwed up everything in my life so far. Let me try to be successful at this, which led to me watching personal development stuff on YouTube, which led to me watching like TED Talks, different things like that, how to be a better leader. And I primarily did that to get better at my job. But then consequently, I started posting some of that stuff online, just some of the things I was learning, which led to the writing career. And as far as like my mentality, I just got to the point where I was super frustrated and super duper fed up. Like I remember one day I was watching a video and literally it was a promo for a self-improvement course by this guy named Ty Lopez.
Okay. I've heard the name.
I'm sitting in my room. I'm like, it was like some $100 course. I was still broke at the time. I was like, who is this guy? Blah, 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 blah. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I don't care. I don't care if this guy scams me and takes my money. I am done. I'm done living like this. I'm going to try something. Turned out to be a really, really good course, by the way. Ty Lopez is a really, really good guy, by the way. And I took his course while I was working on becoming a better version of myself, while working at the video store. And it was a course where you went through a new video each day for 67 days because studies show that it takes about 66 days to build a new habit.
Okay.
So I did that video every day. I would listen to it. I had no car. I had to walk like a mile back and forth to work.
Okay.
So I basically just started this process of like brainwashing myself into figuring out what to do with my life because I just knew what I was living. It wasn't it for me.
Yeah. There's a couple pieces of that. I mean, you were committed to that, and you put some skin in the game. You had to give up $100 for it. So that consistency and being committed to something or anything you want to be committed to. I mean, you've shown that you can make it all work. Something else you mentioned too, TED Talks, and I know you did a TED Talk. What was that? Probably 3 or 4 years ago.
It was about 3 years ago.
Okay, what was that experience like? I'm just curious.
That was one of the best days of my life.
Really, yeah.
One of the most frightening days of my life too,
Mm-hmm.
which just goes to show that going through that barrier of fear, then coming out the other side, like feels really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we had a rehearsal where we would just go up in front of the stage and we would just give our talks. There was no one in the audience for that rehearsal.
Right.
It was like 2 weeks prior to the event.
Okay.
I got up on stage and I looked out at all the seats and I totally froze.
Shut down.
Totally froze, totally shut down. I'm like, how am I going to do this? What did I get myself into? But then when I actually gave the talk, it ended up going without a hitch. Everything went great, which goes to show you is like step into the opportunities before you think you're ready to do them. Like they had an open pitch night for people in town to try out for TED Talk. I was like, what business do I have doing it? But I was like, the worst I could say is no.
Right.
And if they say yes, then I have made a commitment that will embarrass me if I pull out of. So I put myself in a tight spot. So you got to figure out a way to put yourself in situations before you're ready, which they kind of force you to perform. So
that's
really one of the best days ever.
Yeah, and what you just said too is leaning into that fear, and when you have an opportunity, it's there's a lot of ambiguity around it. You don't really know how it's going to go, but the biggest thing you just said there is what's the worst that can happen, right? They say no. You go try out, they say no, and you get on stage and you made it happen. And I love your TED Talk too. I can link it too if anyone's interested in seeing it, or you can reach out to us. I want to maybe switch gears a little bit. And before we got to talking about the podcast, I was talking about health and wellness, which obviously that's kind of the focus of what Dr. Mel and I do. I'm just curious, from your perspective, when it comes to health and wellness strategies in particular, or I guess whatever you want to talk about, but what does it mean to live a healthy and well life?
A healthy and well life is a combination of mind and body.
Okay.
See, people look at the mind and body as different. I look at them as one kind of like symbiotic unit. So I do a lot of things to keep my mental in focus as well as my physical, but then they bleed over into one another. So for example, I wake up every day and I do meditation. I meditate for 20 minutes, and that's to, try to keep myself mentally focused and in the present moment throughout the day. I do yoga for a lot of the same reasons, and then it's good for the body too. I do intermittent fasting because it's just a good way to stay under a calorie deficit, and it gives you more clarity, at least for me, like not getting that sluggishness from eating a bunch right away. That kind of clouds the mind. And so when I do the mental stuff, that gets my day started. But then the physical stuff goes back into the mental, because most people, if you picture the average person in society, they're waking up, they drink a 600 calorie coffee to start the day. They have a bagel or a donut. And so what does that do? Sets you up for a glucose sugar crash right around noon. Then you eat a lunch that's not healthy for you on the go, so the rest of your day is shot. And then by the time you get home, you've been eating crappy food and you have been sluggish all day, so you don't want to go work out. But the secret is that if you're too tired to go work out, the only way to stop being too tired to work out is to go work out.
Start working out,
You have to get that momentum going, and really habits just create a positive or negative cycle. And most people, you notice, as soon as they start picking up one healthy habit, they pick up more.
Absolutely.
And people, the opposite is also true. And a lot of people just aren't, fulfilling their purpose or following their dreams because they literally lack energy. And so the energy in your mind state is important. Like how many preventable diseases are caused by just stress, just cortisol, chemicals? Like being stressed out can kill you, literally happens every day. And most people are stressed out, frazzled, eating poorly, which just creates a perpetuating cycle of continuing to be stressed. So you have to get healthy.
Man, you might want to rewind and listen to all that again. There's a lot of real knowledge in there. I think one of the biggest takeaways from all that too is like you said, it's positive and negative, right? And you're doing something that's gonna have a positive impact or a negative impact on what's next, the next decision that you make, the next thing that you do. And it's all about getting on that positive upward cycle is what I refer to it, with my coaching clients is, making one decision isn't going to change everything, but it can change the next decision you make, which in turn changes the next one and the next one and the next one. So thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to delve into actually a little bit of the fasting topic. Tell me more about your experience. How long have you been doing the intermittent fasting? What does it look like for you? And what would you tell other people about it?
So I've been intermittent fasting for about 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
I had gotten a little out of sorts, a little out of shape. I was working a lot on my business and stuff, and I kind of let things fall by the wayside. So I was like, okay, let me figure out something that's going to work for me. Mm-hmm. So I started intermittent fasting for a couple reasons. One, I just knew it was the easiest way to keep myself in a calorie deficit. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people talk about there's a number of different diet strategies that work. But you have to you have to eat less than you expend. It's just simple mathematics. It's energy. Yeah. So I wanted to have a strategy that I could use to still eat kind of the meals that I want, but then stay under the calorie deficit. So I looked into intermittent fasting, saw all the different benefits from it. And so usually what I'll do is I will eat a meal around noon, eat a meal around 1, and then I'll eat something light with protein and vegetables and some fruit. So I don't eat a lot of refined carbohydrates. I don't eat a lot of sugar. I don't drink calories. So I primarily try to eat things that come from nature. Yeah. It's pretty simple. If you just eat whole foods that come from nature, that'll pretty much cover all your bases. And then the other thing I noticed about it was I'd have a lot more mental clarity just by not eating until later on in the day.
Yeah.
And so usually I'll wake up and I'll start working from around, some days I'll start working around 6 a.m., some days at 8. So by the time I've eaten, I've already basically gotten that full work day in. Mm-hmm. And so when I eat, it's not going to bog me down and have me, having those glucose crashes and things like that.
You're able to use your energy to be productive with, your business, writing, creating content, with working, rather than having to use energy to break down that food inside your body.
Yeah. Exactly.
And too, when it comes to fasting, your body, essentially what fasting does is it gets your body into ketosis, which the ketogenic diet, which is Atkins rebranded. It's all about getting into this state of ketosis. Well, mm-hmm. The easiest way for a human to get into ketosis is just to not eat, because then your body, once it burns through all the carbs, it'll start burning ketones from fat for energy. And your brain is burning a ton of fat for energy. Your brain actually uses way more ketones than any part of your body, because your brain is comprised of about 60 to 70% fat. So when you're doing that intermittent fasting, your brain is it's ticking.
Yeah. And it goes back to kind of going back to your ancestors' way of eating and the way that they, the habits that they had. So yes, they had a shorter lifespan back in the day with our ancestors, but that's because they got killed by natural disasters and animals, and they didn't have medical technology to help them live as long as we do. But they never had the sort of kind of diseases that come from the way that we live, which is a very sedentary lifestyle, which is a lifestyle where we're constantly eating. So if you look back to nomadic tribes and hunter-gatherers, they didn't eat 3 square meals a day. They weren't going to McDonald's for breakfast in the morning. A, they had to hunt and forage for their food, and B, sometimes they would not have food to eat. So you just have to map it back to that evolutionary pattern and understand that it's not just eating the kind of foods that your ancestors ate. It's also eating with, some irregularity. People have come to believe that you're not supposed to be hungry, that you're supposed to be full and satiated all the time, which is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
And there's something about hunger that teaches you about life too. It's like when you're hungry, it's like, all right, do you have discipline to not eat? Do you have discipline to not shove chips and cookies and donuts into your mouth?
Yeah.
You know, so it's a mental and kind of self-improvement discipline as well as a health one.
I love that. Yeah. And, establishing that willpower, right? That willpower muscle. Like, yeah, I know I'm hungry right now, but I'm at, XYZ event and all I got available to me is cookies and brownies. I can wait for an hour until I'm able to get some higher, more nutritious whole foods inside my body. So
Absolutely.
really cool to hear that. Something else that you mentioned too, when talking about, our ancestors versus where we're at today, and kind of stringing it back to what you're talking about, stress, right? I mean, what would you say we live in a more or less stressful environment now versus the ancestors you were talking about?
Oh, by far, we're way more stressed because you got to think, they had certain stresses, like they lived in the wild and, they could be killed and whatnot by, either warring tribes or wild animals, stuff like that. But after they hunted and foraged, what did they do? They chilled.
Yeah, they were
hung
with
out.
each other. Yeah.
They were with each other.
Mhm.
The entire family, from the great grandchild to the great grandparent, was all together.
Yeah.
So you have those evolution of different generations interacting with one another. But now we all live in separate, confined little boxes. We're alienated. We're isolated. That causes stress.
Yeah.
We're not in the tribes anymore. That causes stress. We are living in a world that is just there's too much stimulus in the world for the average person. We're on our phone constantly. We're running back and forth to errands, eating crappy food constantly. Like another evolutionary mismatch. The reason why we crave fatty and sweet foods is because those resources were more scarce back then.
Oh,
so if you were a hunter-gatherer and you lucked up on finding some, food with a lot of sugar in it that could give you a lot of calories, or food that could fill you up with a lot of calories, you ate as much as you possibly could because you didn't know the next time you're going to come across that resource. But now it's readily available, but your lizard brain still looks at that package of M&Ms and thinks of it as like berries in the forest that you might not see again.
Yeah. It's interesting because we've evolved a bit, but still the way that our body operates and views things like food or basic energy input and output, like you said, going back to that lizard brain or the scarcity mindset when it comes to sugar, and we're seeing the effects of it right now in our society. I thank you for going into depth on those topics. And the one other thing too, what you said too about living in our boxes or being on our phones. I mean, when you think about it from a nervous system, and we're in a chiropractic office, when you think about it from the nervous system perspective, we have our vagus nerve that comes down the brainstem, and right here, there's a part of the social nervous system that goes out to connect with others, right? But when we're shutting that down, it's almost like this triple-edged sword, because we think we're connecting with people on a phone like this, when our physiology is saying, no, we're in a fight or flight or more of a sympathetic kind of a shutdown state. We're not truly connecting. And people are tricking themselves into thinking that having these phones and being able to text or do social media is connecting, but it's not real. Humans are designed, like you said, to be in a community, to be with others, to connect, for that physical touch, right? Eye contact, being there. So I thank you for delving into a lot of these awesome topics. And I didn't mention this beforehand, but we don't have any script. I was like, what do you want to talk about? I was like, we'll figure it out. So I thank you for all of your insight and everything that you do. Before we wrap things up, I do want to ask, what's the best way for people to, actually, before we get to that, what is, I guess, 1, 2, or 3, what are the biggest takeaways, whether it's with self-help, food, nutrition, whatever it is? What do you want our audience and your audience to know? What are some big takeaways?
Well, just from some of the things we talked about, that upward and downward spiral is key. So I talk often a lot about feedback loops. So anytime that you're trying to do something new, what your brain does is it goes back into your memory and thinks about all the other times where you tried to face a similar challenge. And it's going to pull up all the ones where you failed. So you have to overcome that initial inertia and then build some momentum, but you want to create more reference experiences for you to look at and like send that subconscious signal to your brain that you are successful. So you have to get to that tipping point. Like if it's your workout routine, you won't feel good right away. There's no self-help content that's going to force you to make those initial steps to go work out. But once you gain momentum with it, it is easier to work out. Once you gain momentum in any area of life, it is easier. So now I wake up, I don't need motivation to do anything, but that's because I've been writing almost daily for 5 years straight, working on my business daily for almost 5 years straight. So now the more momentum you get over time, you build a bunch of references, and I can draw from thousands of memories where I'm doing the right thing. And so you want to get to the point where like you hit this upward curve. So like most people, you start down here, and most people just quit before they reach that tipping point. So maybe that's 6 months. If you can stick with something for 6 months, stick with it for a year, all of a sudden things go up dramatically, and you can expend like the same amount of effort, but then you get much better results. So I would spend the same amount of time writing my 100th blog post than I did with like my first one, but now I have an audience with that 100th one. So the same level of effort kind of gives you exponential reward. So you want to build momentum, and momentum in either direction. It's like the better in shape you get, the easier it is to work out. But then the worse you gain more weight, you continue to gain more weight because you hit that point where you throw up your hands, you're just like, screw it. Might as well. And I know you can attest to that from experience. Your first workouts, you probably didn't enjoy it very much. When you're first learning to get better with your eating, you probably didn't enjoy it very much. But now, does it take as much motivation for you to eat well and exercise as it did when you were 150 pounds heavier?
No.
Absolutely not.
It's my lifestyle now.
Exactly.
Yeah. If anything, when I deviate from it, I feel it more, and I'm like, oh, now I remember why I'm not doing those things anymore. So
yeah,
awesome. And I think what I'm really hearing from you is you got to put in the work. You just got to do it, man.
Got to do the work. I mean, the way that I look at it, you're already like, people are always like worried about this pain and stress that they're gonna feel like towards working out or building a dream or starting a business or switching a job. It's like, you're already in pain. You already don't feel good. You're already going through a certain level of stress. I was like, if you're gonna have problems, at least have your problems go to something worthwhile. That's the equation I put in my mind. I'm like, okay, my life is not good. So I felt like, okay, I can either have my life not be good or like try to do something about it.
Yeah.
And that fear, I guess, is so palpable that people don't do anything about it. But it's like, it is your life. Like, you are going to die, and you might die way sooner than you think. And I look at people and I'm like, they don't know they're gonna die. They wake up and they live like they're gonna live forever, just pushing it off. Eventually, you don't have time.
Yeah.
And it's the world is trying to coerce you into like being this, like societally programmed robot. And you have to undo your brainwashing.
Yep.
So I always tell people, like, self-help in and of itself isn't very effective individually, which is why you basically have to like bathe yourself in these teachings, bathe yourself in these habits until they stick, because the world around you is not set up for you to be successful at all in any shape or form. The world is set up for you to fail in every way you can think of. So you have to understand, it's a battle you're fighting. You have to fight for your life.
Yeah, you got to find those strategies that are going to work. Awesome. Well, before we close, if you just want to, mention how people can get in contact with you, and then your third book too. I'm curious, what's it going to be called, and when can we expect to see it on Amazon?
Yeah, my third book is called Real Help: The Honest Guide to Self-Improvement, or The Brutally Honest Guide to Self-Improvement. I haven't decided yet.
Right.
But I wrote that book because after 5 years of learning and writing about self-improvement, I realized a lot of it was bullshit. And I realized they were sending a message that didn't have any context to it, and just kind of making blanket, generalized advice, like, just follow my 10 steps and like, it'll all be okay. It's like, no, that's not how the world works. So this is a book that teaches you self-help principles that account for the way the world really works. And there's no rose-colored glasses or sugarcoating, and it's the brutally honest truth about what it takes to be successful. So that's Real Help.
Very cool.
If you want to find my writing, you reach me at ayotheauthor.com, AYO, theauthor.com. I also have a website that teaches other people how to become writers if you're interested in that, and that's ayotherewriter.com. And then all my social media handles are at Ayo the Author, all of them. So just look it up that
Consistency.
way. Consistency, absolutely.
Make it simple. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. It's been a pleasure. And I will look forward to continuing to follow your journey and writing. And dude, I'm just so excited for... I mean, I've been watching you put in the work. It's been cool to watch because I remember those long Facebook posts and what it's turned into now. And man, the future there's no limits with you. I'm pumped, man. So thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For everyone, for our listeners, remember to check out Ayo's work. And if you can, also subscribe. And we'll see you next time. In the meantime, keep inspiring.
Sweet.